Carbide wood turning tools. Who needs them? They're all the latest rage now. Are they God's gift to brand new wood turners, or are they just scrapers? I'm going to give you my thoughts about it coming up now. Hi y'all, welcome to my shop. I'm Mike Peace and I'm passionate about wood turning, and I'm here to share with you tips, tricks, and techniques to help you become a better wood turner. So if that's what you're interested in, please consider clicking on the subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you won't miss any future episodes. Wood turning is all about the fun of making something. And it doesn't really matter what tools you use when it's all said and done. I've never heard of anybody that bought or was given a wood-turned item that asked, did you use Carbide tools? They don't know how much you sanded it. It's all about coming up with a finished item, and how you got there really doesn't make a lot of difference if it works for you. I didn't have any wood-turning, any Carbide tools, so I've asked my friend Jeff Barnes, who's in a couple of clubs with me, who started off with some Carbide tools, and he graciously offered to help out with this video. Now, I want to clarify, we're talking about flat Carbide, such as the Easy Wood tools and the cutter sold by Captain Eddie Castellan. Some of y'all may be familiar with Captain Eddie. And we're not talking about the nano Carbide cupped cutters that are used typically for hollowing urns and such that is sold by Mike Hunter. We'll save that discussion for another day. Jeff, you got started with Easy Wood tools. Tell me a little bit about your view.
Yeah. Well, basically, this is how I was able to get into wood turning. I didn't have a big budget to start, and when I got started, my wife got me a lathe for Christmas, a small one, and she went to the Woodcraft, and they recommend starting with the Easy Wood tools. I didn't have a grinder. I didn't know how to grind, so this was a way I could get started, and I used them for several months before I started to get into the more of the traditional tools.
Okay. Well, in this video, we're gonna introduce you to the basic Carbide tools, the different profiles, and what some of the pros and cons. Let's start talking about pros. Jeff's mentioned some of them, and some of them I wound up repeating, but they're certainly easy to use. They have a lower entry point because you don't have to buy a grinder or a jig. You don't have to learn how to sharpen. Which is a real benefit for a lot of people, because it's one more barrier to joining the club, so to speak, is learning how to sharpen. Because they're very sharp. They last the edge lasts about 40 times as long as high-speed steel, and then once they're dull, you just pitch it and get another one. Some people have ways of sharpening. We're not going to get into that. It only takes about 3 tools, as you can see in this picture, and we'll go through each one of these. I think, though, the biggest benefit, as Jeff mentioned, is they're easy to get started. So you don't have that steep learning curve that would put off a lot of people from starting wood turning, that they might deal with that higher learning curve with traditional tools. All right, I'm going to have Jeff introduce you to using the tool that he would most likely use for rounding this to a cylinder, and that's, I think, the square profile.
Yeah, I've heard different people say the round one's the rougher. I've heard some people say the square one's the rougher. I kind of go back and forth.
Yeah, and I think it's whatever works best. From the videos that I've seen, it looks like they tend to use the square one, and the square one, as I understand, has 2 different profiles. I'm not sure which profile you've got. Is it perfectly square, or is it radius?
This one's got the radius.
Yeah, the radius, I think maybe the first square one wasn't as popular. I think the radius one,
One of the things I found with the first square one is that if you weren't careful, if you twisted just a little bit, that corner would dig deep.
Yes.
And you can get a really big cut and really big gouge really quick.
Yeah, so I agree. I think that makes sense. So go ahead and rough that. You need to wear
face shield.
Face shield.
Yeah. And you just turn the speed up on yours, right?
Yep. So as I see, you got this anchored in your body, and you're turning it. You actually have it perfectly flat, and the tool's got a square shank, which makes it easy to ride on the tool rest to keep it from turning on you. And it looks like it hogs out a pretty good bit of wood. Now let's stop for a second, Jeff, and let's see what the results look like, and then contrast that with a more traditional spindle roughing gouge. And
So you can see there is a fair amount of tear.
so you can see, you know, what a rough edge you're going to get. Let's see if it gets any better with a traditional tool. Since he's got the corners scraped off, this would probably be just as rough knocking off those corners like this. But then now the corners are knocked off. Is that the speed around 1200 that you'd normally use?
Yeah.
I'm going to ramp that up a little bit, about 1900. This is pine, so it's not going to give us the best cut anyway. It's not perfectly round yet, but we can still see some tear out, but it's slightly improved. Let's go ahead and get this thing round. I think I've compared this to cutting bananas for cereal. We don't care if they're all perfectly 1/8 of an inch. We just want to get them cut so we can get on about the business of eating our cereal. Then we slow the feed rate down. There's factors that affect cutting, and it doesn't make any difference whether you're using scrapers or whether you're using high-speed steel, and that's the lathe speed, the feed rate, which is how fast you're pushing into the wood itself, the sharpness of the cutter, whether it's the tool or the carbide, you know, how much of the cutting tool you have on the surface of the wood, and also the angle of the cutter or the angle of the tool. They'll all affect the quality of your cut. Now the easy rougher tool or the carbide scraper, on pine, you're still going to finish with a pretty rough surface, but we can, with conventional tools, we can step up to a skew for a finishing cut. Now, Jeff, would you get anywhere close to that kind of surface on pine with that scraper?
No, not quite that close on pine, no.
So the ultimate difference is you're going to do more sanding with carbide tools, but the net result when you finish the sanding is nobody could look at it and tell whether you sanded carbide and did a little more sanding or whether you used did more slicing.
That's correct.
So let me show a little bit on the slicing, for example. If we incline this tool, you can see we get a very nice slice shavings at a 45-degree angle, whereas if you use the carbide, so with this you've got a lot more edge with the scraper in contact, and you're abrading the surface. You're actually ripping the fibers off as opposed to the slicing. Doesn't always have to be this bad, but that does show you a high contrast of a slice versus abrading the surface with a scrape. Okay, so Jeff, you know, let's talk about those three basic profiles. You've already showed us the square one that you roughed with, the square that was profiled. Now the next tool you're going to show is going to be the round cutter.
Right.
So, Jeff, you've already showed us the square scraper that has somewhat of a profile, a little bit rounded edges so you don't dig the corner. The second one is the round one, and what do you use it for mostly?
I tend to use the round one more for the shaping.
Okay.
I'll traditionally, I'll use the round one more for shaping. I find it's a lot easier for me to control and use when I want to do coves and valleys or round over the end of something. So I don't tend to like the square one for that. It's for me, it's just a personal preference.
So mostly beads and coves, and
Yeah.
Certainly, I guess if you were using it in lieu of a bowl gouge
Right, yes.
on the inside of a
Yeah,
bowl.
yeah.
Okay, so let's make a feature or two, a bead or a cove.
All right, do a cove here.
So again, flat on. And one of the things I notice is you're a little further over the tool rest because you have to allow room for that larger cutter than a traditional tool. So you have a little bit less leverage, but not enough that you're off hanging enough for it to be a problem.
And one thing I found with Carbide tools is you can get an aggressive cut or a very finesse cut as well. So you can go just jam it in there and really cut deep, or you can barely touch the wood and barely kiss the wood and do a very smooth, controlled cut.
It reminds me of that acronym that Mark Palma used in his demonstration. ASS. Anchor the tool, shove it, and scrape.